all started by a minefield. Mines, if properly laid and sited, can play havoc with armored vehicles. They are designed to break tracks, bringing the tanks to a standstill and allowing them to be dealt with by other means. The mines themselves will only stop the tanks. The crew and weapons will be unharmed. Here are some of the little chaps that do the work. These are the 4 main types of British anti-tank mines. Not very big, are they, if you compare them with the steel helmet? But they pack a punch out of all proportion to their size. This one is the Mk.II, very handy and compact. Only 7.5 inches across and just over 3 inches high. But it holds 4 pounds of powerful high explosive. The cover, which normally must not be removed in the field, is attached to the body by these bayonet joints. This hole is where the fuse will project. At the moment, it is protected by a plug to keep out moisture. The Mk.II is very sensitive to blast, so a small Sorbo ring is fitted over the fuse head to absorb the momentary shock of the blast without too much raising the firing pressure. To fuse the mine, remove the protecting plug and examine the sleeve for defects or obstructions. This is the fuse. The safety device is internal and there is no safety pin to withdraw, so handle it with care. Insert it in the base and screw home just hand tight. The mine is then ready for laying. Here is a section showing how it works. When a vehicle passes over the mine, the cover is pressed onto the head of the fuse. Take a closer look. The head is forced in, taking with it the plunger and allowing the balls retaining the striker to move out of the way. The striker is now free to hit the percussion cap. The flash passes to the detonator, which fires the explosive in the detonator plug fire channel, on to the exploder and main charge. The Mk.II is packed in a metal box holding 8 mines. The fuses are in stiff card tubes held in clips in the lid. Bigger than the Mk.II is the Mk.IV. It measures 8 inches across, 5 inches high, and has double the charge of the Mk.II, about 8 pounds. Remove the tape and take off the cover, which, when packed, is not fixed to the spring straps. You can see the fuse pocket in the center of the body, sealed when new by a small piece of waxed paper for protection. And here is the fuse itself, larger than that for the Mk.II and fitted with a safety pin, which must be withdrawn to make the fuse live. But before doing so, examine the shear wire. If this is damaged or missing, reject the fuse. To get the safety pin out, you'll probably need a pair of pliers. So see that each member of the fusing party carries a pair. As you wear. That won't do. Always put the pin in your pocket. You may be glad of it later. And anyway, why make a present of it to the enemy? Now replace the cover without putting too much pressure on it. It's the Boche you want to blow up, not yourself. The fuse operates very simply. The striker, in the normal live state, is held away from the cap by a shear wire. The shear wire breaks under pressure, and the striker is forced down by its spring onto the percussion cap. This sets off the detonator, the magazine, and the main filling. With certain modifications, this mine has become the Mk.V.C. Notice that the charge no longer fills the whole body. It's still pretty powerful, but uses less explosive, about 5 pounds. The top of the mine offers the same danger area as the Mk.IV. The Mk.V, a later model, has no solid cover. Instead, after inserting the fuse, put over it this metal cup on its rubber washer to keep out any moisture. Then fix on the spider, a metal crosspiece. This fixes like the solid cover to the spring straps, but is less sensitive to blast. All these 3 mines are packed in wooden crates, 5 mines in each. Fuses are packed separately, 5 to a tin and 4 tins to a box. Whatever type of mine you use, remember that they are meant to catch tanks, but they're not a bit of use if the driver can see them. So, as a general rule, sink them so that the tops are 1.5 inches above ground level. Laid like this, there are no large lumps to give them away, especially if the surface is carefully relaid as it was before. In rough and scrubby ground, this may be enough to hide the whole field. But where there's no scrub to hide the tops and the soil is fairly firm, you can bury these mines completely. Dig a hole so that the top of the mine comes about 1/2 inch below the surface. Then, starting 2 inches below ground, countersink the hole for 6 inches all round. Then replace the spoil and smooth it back to the original state. The full weight of the vehicle is now certain to bear on the mine and cannot push it to one side. But you may not always have the time or the tools for burying mines. At a hasty roadblock, for example. A vehicle may just push a Mark 4 or 5 to one side, unless soil or brushwood is packed around to anchor it. The Mark 2 will probably stay put. When burying mines, take care that a stone doesn't get under the edge of the cover, or in the case of the Mark 5, under the bars of the spider. The mine would be neutralized. Now we'll have a look at a complete minefield. Blimey. It looks just like the vicarage lawn after the choir boy's outing. You might just as well put up a notice. There are bits of tape, to say nothing of empty crates and fuse tins. Vehicle tracks, too. And look at the tops of those mines, shining to high heaven. Even if they were completely buried, the other evidence would give the game away. Spoil, tracks, litter, mounds, boundary markings, whether wire or what have you. Don't give the Hun a clue. Scatter the spoil. Don't leave piles of it to show you've been digging. Rake over the tracks of men or lorries. As for litter, why leave any? Again, when selecting your site, always choose the roughest ground you can, and so break up what is, after all, rather a regular layout. There is always a certain amount of scrub, even if it's only thistles. Make use of it. And don't string your wire across the country like a lot of clotheslines. You merely draw attention to your position. Run it down hedgerows and along the ditches so that it blends with the natural features of the landscape. Now then, what about the arrangement of our mines? Well, here is a sector where some have been laid, and here comes a Hun. He's spotted it. He's going to take a chance. Watch him get blown to blazes. Blimey, he's through. Here is a reconstruction of his journey. See? The mines were too far apart, and he was able to steer between them. There was only one mine per 2 yards of front. We should have had another 12 mines, giving us 1 mine per 1 yard of front. This is the very minimum and should stop about half the tanks. If we had 2 mines per yard of front, almost all tanks should be stopped. Now what's happened? Blast. That's just what it was, blast. Mines with no blast protection must never be closer together than 5 yards. So put the mines in rows, giving the field depth. As in all forms of defense, depth is vital. If there are not enough rows, a single tank will clear a path for his pals. So 5 rows is the very minimum to do the job. But don't lay them in an orchard pattern. This leaves lanes at a slight angle. So here is a standard layout that will do the job. It's simple and it's effective. Never less than 5 rows with at least 5 yards between rows and between mines. Naturally, you can increase the number of rows according to the number of mines at your disposal. You can vary the pattern to your heart's content when you've plenty of time to measure and record. An irregular pattern will be easier to camouflage and make it harder for the enemy to neutralize the field. But whatever your pattern, a guide to the minimum number of mines you require is to measure your front and use 1 for each yard. Now that we've learnt our lesson and relayed our field, let's sit back and watch the damage. Got him. That'll have taken off his track and put him out of action. It has, too. Nice work. Hell, not so very much out of action after all. Look at those weapons. They must be dealt with, too. So what's the answer? Back you go, you baskets, while we cook up something else for you. Right. You can come on now. Hold your fire. Let them get right out. Covering fire. That's the golden rule. Cover every minefield with fire, both anti-tank and small arms. Without these, your mines will only delay the enemy. They won't stop him. Now let us assume that an enemy armored force is expected to attack us from behind that ridge, and that he's bound to cross this stretch of ground. We're going to make it as unhealthy for him as we can in the time available. The working party is already going up. Here's a more extensive view of the country we've just seen. He can't approach this way. So here's the line he must follow. 8 rows of mines ought to stop him. Always lay anti-personnel mines along that side of your field nearest the enemy. As, however, we're only dealing with anti-tank, we won't see them laid. To simplify the laying, we first of all run out tapes, 1 to each pair of rows. These act as guides to the lorries which carry the mines up. Especially at night, the best time for mine laying, tapes are an essential guide. First, lay those mines nearest the enemy. They'll hinder him if he tries to interfere. With the tapes laid, the lorries drive up. 2 men on board uncrate mines and fuses and hand them to the distributing party of 4 men who peel off to either side of the tape. The NCO in charge, pacing evenly along, tells them where to lay each mine. Each man paces out at right angles to the tape according to the spacing of the mines. Let's follow one man. He receives a mine and fuse, goes direct from the tape to his position, and lays down his rifle facing the enemy. Then he fuses the mine. Good. He's remembered to put all the litter in his pocket. First, out comes the safety pin. A tight fit. He needs those pliers, you see. Now, what are you going to do with that pin? Good for you. In with the fuse and on with the cover. Gently does it. Leaving the mine in position for the digging party who are following on, he retraces his steps to the tape and catches up with the lorry. Now then, what about the digging party? Their job is to sink or bury the mines exactly where placed by the distributing party. According to the nature of the soil, each man has either pick or shovel, but never both. They'd only clank together and warn the enemy. Any turf must be carefully relayed as camouflage. A digger must keep to the tape side of the hole he's digging and not work around it. We know the mines are anti-tank, but the mines don't. Now, the use of lorries in laying is the exception rather than the rule. Their tracks are a surefire giveaway from the air. So what do? It's quite simple. The crates of mines are carried by hand to a main dump under cover. From here, they are fed to smaller dumps along the home side of the field. Each of these smaller dumps consists of sufficient mines and fuses to ensure an uninterrupted flow to the laying party on each tape. One man from each tape collects mines and fuses and carries them up to his laying party. Having delivered them, he returns to the next dump with the empties. A, B, C, and D are the dumps on the home side of the field. As we've 4 lines of tape, we need 4 men, each to feed a line. Got it? Having delivered the goods, each man returns to the next dump, B, takes a fresh crate, and straight up to his tape again. Here he waits for his working party, who've been laying mines along their tapes. He collects the empty crate from them and returns to the next dump, C. In this way, an uninterrupted supply is kept up to each working party. When the laying party have finished the field, each must work back along its own tape, roughing up the track as it goes and clearing away any other telltale traces. So much for hand distribution. Now, here's a pretty thing, with an ugly message to the enemy. The 75 grenade mine, which is being issued to all arms, weighing only 2 pounds, it has one advantage over the other mines you've seen. It's quite safe to throw about when fused. The main body is a flattish tin 7 inches long with a screw filling cap at one end. On one side of the body is fixed a flat metal bridge. This is the pressure plate. When the plate is crushed, this small V notch will explode the igniter sets held in these sockets. You should see the red part of the sets if they're in correctly. Each set is composed of a chemical igniter, into the end of which is slipped a detonator. A rubber sleeve protects the joint from outside water. To fuse the mine, join up 2 igniter sets and insert them, detonator end first, into their sockets. Close them in with a metal flap and your mine's fused. Here's a diagram section of the 75. The body of the mine is filled with explosive, 1.5 pounds in all. When a heavy object crushes it, the V-notch breaks the igniters. They pass a flash into the detonator and Bob's your uncle. So you see, if you use it as a grenade, it doesn't matter which way up it falls. The 75 has only to be crushed to do its job. When used as a mine, sink it in the ground, if you have time, in the usual way, but leave the pressure plate just above the surface. The rules for spacing and layout are the same as for other anti-tank mines, but since the 75 is so much smaller, you should have at least 2 mines per yard of front. The 75 is particularly suited to close warfare and street fighting. Got him. But don't forget covering fire. Now then, let's go over some of the ground we've covered. 4 types of British mines, any of which you're likely to meet, and it's as well to know how to handle them before meeting them in the field. The Mark II with a metal cover, which you must not normally take off in the field. The fuse goes in the base. Anti-blast protection is provided by a Sorbo ring. Next, the Mark IV with a larger cover, which must be taken off to put in the fuse. This mine is very sensitive to blast. The Mark V-C is a modification of the Mark IV. The cover may be replaced by a spider to cut down the sensitivity, giving us the Mark V, and finally, the 75 grenade mine, fused by 2 igniter sets dropped into these sockets and held by 2 flaps. It can be used as an ordinary mine or as a grenade. As for the principles of laying minefields, first, tapes must be run out as guides, to be followed rigidly by the laying party. Where lorries are used, the parties will be 1 NCO and 14 men per tape. That is, for each pair of rows, 8 of them diggers. Where hand distribution has to be used, we need an NCO and 7 men for each tape. In either case, the infantry section at battle strength will fit into the system. Having laid a field, don't forget to make it hard for the enemy to find your mines. Clear away all litter. Leave no traces. Sink the mines, leaving 1.5 inches above surface if it's scrubby, and camouflage that. If the ground is flat, remember the shape of the hole that will allow the top to be 1/2 inch below surface. At this level, the force to fire the mine is about 350 pounds. So you can't rely on them to stop enemy cyclists or foot sloggers. Don't lay mines less than 5 yards apart and never less than 5 rows. Avoid an orchard pattern, which leaves lanes for the enemy. And finally, as a guide to the number of mines you'll require, never lay less than 1 to every yard of front. Give the enemy no chance to clear a passage. Cover your field with anti-tank and small arms fire. To round off, here's a most important point. When laying a field, a record of the layout must be made and kept. Nothing elaborate is required, but all the information for finding the mines must be there. Some prominent object must be shown, with its map reference. The ends of the field can then be located. If you record the distance and true bearings from object to field. If there is a kink in the line, mark in also the direction of the rows. Rough in the other rows and indicate the pattern of your layout. The other necessary information goes in a separate panel. Type of mine, number and spacing of rows, number and spacing of mines, approximate scale. And don't forget the heading and the north point. If you vary the spacing of the rows, you must naturally write in the details. When the sketch is complete, it will look something like this. It must be kept with care, probably by the nearest I.O. with a bag holding all the safety pins taken from the fuses. Now, should the order come to allow the passage of our own troops, you can clear your minefield just as quickly as you laid it, and so make your contribution to a large-scale operation.